Some breakups don't end with shouting, they end in silence. A silence not meant to escape, but to rise. In the world of a narcissist, you don't need to say a word, because your absence, when filled with the light of healing, is exactly what causes their collapse. Today's video isn't about teaching you revenge. It's about helping you understand why silence paired with personal growth is the ultimate blow to those who once manipulated you. This is a deep psychological journey where you'll discover that no contact is not the end. It's the first door that opens to true freedom. Don't miss a single moment, because the further you go, the more you'll realize you're not just walking away from them, you're finally coming home to yourself. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us, because what you're about to hear won't just help you understand them, it will forever change the way you see yourself. Have you ever thought that simply blocking their number, deleting their contact, or ignoring their messages would be enough to make the narcissist disappear from your life? Unfortunately, that's only the beginning, just the curtain lifting on the battle to reclaim yourself. Because to a narcissist, silence doesn't mean loss. They don't experience absence the way you do. They see your disappearance as a chance to rewrite the narrative, one where they are still the center. They'll assume you're still in pain, still regretting, still watching them in silence. And if that's true, it only continues to feed their inflated and toxic ego. But what if you begin to shift? What if your silence is no longer laced with sorrow or regret, but filled with intention, clarity, and the light of healing? What if you're not just disappearing, but becoming? Becoming a version of yourself that is stronger, calmer, and no longer defined by the gaze, judgment, or approval of the one who once broke you. That is the true counter-strike, subtle yet devastating. Because now you're no longer a mirror reflecting their illusion of power, you've become a torch that burns with its own flame. You don't need to say anything to prove yourself. Just live honestly, steadily, without performance. Every step you take forward is a silent yet thunderous rejection of every word they use to diminish you. Every time you smile, not to prove anything but because you genuinely feel joy again, it slices through the story they tell others that you can't live without them. Your quiet growth is something they can't control, and that more than anything is what makes them feel the loss. Not because of love, but because the power they once held is slipping away. And when you no longer care what they're doing, thinking who they're with, or what tricks they're trying to pull to return, that's when you're truly free. Because real freedom isn't just physical distance, it's when they occupy no space in your mind. You're no longer waiting for an apology, seeking validation, or needing anyone to tell you that you were right. Because you, by continuing to live, to love yourself, to choose peace over chaos, have already confirmed your worth. And what a narcissist fears most isn't that you hate them. It's that you feel nothing at all. No anger, no sadness, no longing, no need. When you walk past them like they never existed, not out of spite, but because you've outgrown the person who once needed their attention. That's when they begin to spiral in, a silence they can no longer manipulate. Your silence, if it's just avoidance, still signals to a narcissist that you haven't truly left. To them, the more silent yet emotionally conflicted you are, the more proof they have that they still control your mind. They'll script a story where you're the fragile one pretending to be strong. They don't need to hear you speak because they believe your pain will speak for you. That's why what truly breaks them isn't that you disappear, but that you change. You no longer repeat the old cycles, hoping, hurting, forgiving. You stop making excuses for someone who never planned to stay. You no longer break under the weight of their cold silences. Instead, you redirect that energy into your healing, your growth, your truth. Each time you draw a clear boundary, you declare, "I no longer play by your rules." Every step you take toward the light, even if slow and painful, is a silent but powerful refusal to return to the prison they once built in your mind. And here's the miracle: the moment you stop trying to prove anything to them is the moment you begin proving everything to yourself. They once called you weak. Now you are strong and you're calm. They once said you were dependent. Now you are self-sufficient and no longer need anyone to validate your worth. They once planted the fear in you that you couldn't live without them. and now you are living proof that life truly begins the moment they are no longer in it. And in that moment, they lose more than a lover, a friend, or a source of supply. They lose the last reflection that kept their illusion alive. Because a narcissist has no true self, they survive off the image mirrored back to them by others. When your silence is rooted in strength, when you no longer react, no longer care, no longer try to fix or hold on, you've withdrawn all energy from that mirror, and they begin to collapse into their own emptiness. What they cannot bear is not the fact that you cut contact, but that they no longer occupy any space in your mind. Not because you won, but because they have become completely meaningless to you. Let me be clear. Silence alone does not mean freedom. Some silences are merely pauses, suppression, or a paralyzed state not yet free from the chaos. But true healing silence is when you no longer let them define your worth. When you stop checking their social media, stop caring whether they're happy or sad, who they're with or what they post, that's when you begin reclaiming your emotional power. When you stop telling your friends what they did not, because you've forgotten, but because you no longer need them to be part of your story, that is true freedom. People often imagine the narcissist will fall apart right after you leave. But the truth is, at first they feel triumphant. They believe you'll return, or at least remain trapped in the shadow they left behind. But as time passes, they begin to realize you didn't just disappear, you've changed. You're no longer who you used to be. You're strong without having to prove it. You're at peace without having to hide. You're happy, and you don't need anyone to save you. And that change, it begins to gnaw at their ego. Because in their mind, you were supposed to fall apart. You were supposed to wait for them to come back. You were supposed to need them to rediscover your value. But you quietly broke the script. No confrontation, no revenge, you simply walked away and didn't look back. Your inner world, once it no longer orbits around them, becomes a universe they can no longer access. They may find someone new, create new drama, wear a new mask, but deep down they'll know. Even if no one says it aloud, they've lost something truly irreplaceable. The version of you who once loved, once believed, once gave everything. And that is the real blow, not your retaliation, but your complete absence emotionally, energetically, and mentally. What wounds a narcissist most deeply is never your physical departure. In their mind, people leave and come back. Or if they don't return, they at least carry the narcissist in their heart as an unresolved memory, a lingering wound, a nameless ache. Narcissists survive on the assumption that you're still entangled somewhere in the emotional maze they built. And sadly, sometimes that's true. Many leave but never truly break free. They go silent, but still watch. They block contact, but still hope. They bury their pain, but haven't yet faced it. And the narcissist, with a hyper-awareness of emotional control, can feel that. They still sense they occupy space in you, even if through hatred, regret, or longing. Because to them, any reaction means power. But when you truly stop wanting to know, stop needing to understand, stop caring whether they're joyful or suffering, loving or abandoning, that's when their power dissolves. Your indifference doesn't come from rage, but from clarity. Not because you want to hurt them, but because they're no longer significant enough to provoke a response. When the peace within you becomes so solid that they can no longer shake it, when your smile is no longer forced, but born from the gratitude of having escaped all their mind games, lose their power. They can no longer manipulate you because you no longer crave love from someone incapable of loving. And in the end, they are the ones left behind. Not because you sought revenge, but because you quietly and decisively rose beyond their reach. They didn't just lose you, they lost the version of themselves they built through you. A version that appeared powerful, able to control others' emotions, and always in command. Now all that remains is a fading shadow, because the mirror that once reflected them shattered with your growth. Here's a truth few people realize: a narcissist doesn't need your love. They only need your attention. Whether it's love, hatred, anger, or resentment, as long as you still react, they feel they still have influence. In their mind, reaction equals power. But after enough sleepless nights, unanswered questions, and private breakdowns you had to recover from on your own, you begin to understand true healing doesn't come from forgetting them, but from no longer needing to remember. You no longer need to understand why they did what they did. You no longer seek answers for the pain they caused and walked away from. You no longer need them to validate the truth you already know. At that moment, you begin untangling every invisible chain they once used to bind you through words, emotions, and distortions of reality. And you start feeling a new kind of quiet. Not the quiet of being silenced, but the calm that comes from no one being able to shake your soul anymore. The narcissist once crafted a false version of you, weak, fragile, easy to manipulate. They never expected that the very wounds they left would become the material from which you would rebuild yourself. You no longer play the role of the one who needs saving in their story. You've left the stage, removed the mask, and started writing an entirely new script. Without them, without the cycle of pain, without the endless repetition. And that is something they can neither control nor comprehend. Because to them, every relationship is a chessboard, and they've always believed they hold the pieces. But now you're no longer sitting at the table. You're not playing, not confronting, not sabotaging, not persuading. You've simply walked away and become absent in a way they can no longer manipulate. And that absence, that is the ultimate rejection. A silent yet resounding declaration: I'm no longer here to be controlled. I've chosen freedom. There will come a moment of stillness when you no longer think of the person who hurt you with hatred or regret, but with nothing. And you'll realize you don't need to forgive them in the way others expect. You simply need to let go of the need to understand them, to win against them, or to prove anything to them. That letting go is what frees you from your old role, the one who was wounded. That's when you begin to be reborn, not as someone entirely new, but as a return to your most authentic self. Before the manipulation, before your emotions were cast in doubt, before you were dragged into a story that was never truly yours. You didn't just survive the storm, you walked out with eyes that now see the nature of control and counterfeit love, and feet that no longer tremble at the thought of being alone. From this point on, everything you do no longer carries the flavor of rebellion. You care for yourself not to prove you're okay to anyone, but because you believe you deserve peace. You pursue your goals not to make someone regret losing you, but because you remember now you weren't born to shrink yourself in someone else's shadow. And when you smile this time, it's not because someone is watching or applauding, it's because you've finally found yourself again. And what about the narcissist? They'll try to test the waters to pull you back in, even create new storms just to see if you still react. But this time you don't scream, don't explain, don't rage. You simply don't respond. Not because you're trying to appear noble, but because you've genuinely moved so far beyond their reach. They no longer hold a place in your mind, not because you erased them, but because they made themselves irrelevant to the person you've become. That is the most silent, yet definitive answer. And it's what wounds them, not in a moment of anger, but in a long, quiet unraveling. Because no one can control someone who no longer needs anything from them. When you walk away from a narcissistic relationship, people often think you're running away. But the truth is the opposite. You're not running. You're choosing to live with intention. Because what's most terrifying isn't the ending. It's staying trapped in a whirlwind of emotions designed by someone else, where you can no longer tell which feelings are real or which values are truly your own. Healing is never easy. There will be times when you want to go back, not because you love them, but because you've become used to the chaos they created. There will be moments you miss them, not because they were good, but because your mind was trained to see instability as normal. But once you begin to understand that peace isn't the calm after a storm, but the life that no longer revolves around storms at all, you'll realize you've already come a long way. When a narcissist can no longer trigger a reaction in you, they're forced to face what they've always avoided themselves. No more mirrors to reflect their power. No more targets to manipulate, intimidate, or hurt in order to feel alive. And in the strength of your silence, they hear what terrifies them most. I no longer give you any of my energy. No hatred, no hope, no need. Recovery isn't a single moment. It's a series of choices made every day. Choosing yourself, choosing truth, choosing to separate from what once made you lose your identity. It's when you stop asking what they're thinking, feeling, or doing, and start asking yourself, what do I need today? Who do I want to become? You start investing time in what was once forgotten, small passions, healthy connections, and moments of quiet that no longer carry the weight of fear. You realize you don't need to be loved loudly or to have anyone prove anything to you. You just need to be free in your own mind and heart. And by then, you don't need no contact as a defense strategy anymore. It becomes second nature because what is toxic simply can't touch your world any longer. Truth is the most frightening thing to a narcissist. Isn't your tears, your anger, or your accusations. It's your silence. And not just the kind where you don't speak, but the kind where you no longer think of them as the center of your life. That's when they realize all the manipulation, the silent treatment, the guilt-tripping, love-bombing, and blame-shifting no longer work. Because you're no longer the person you used to be, the one who apologized even when you did nothing wrong, the one who tried so hard to understand them, you forgot to understand yourself. Now you're no longer decoding the mind of the one who hurt you. You're no longer rewriting imaginary dialogues in your head, wishing for a better ending. You simply walk through the memory like a traveler who once got lost, but finally found the light. And that's something no one can teach you, except the experience of loss. Pain, when you dare to face it, doesn't destroy you. It reveals you clearer, deeper, and no longer easy to pull back into toxic loops. When you no longer need anyone to acknowledge the pain you endured, when you no longer hope for justice from someone who doesn't know how to love, that's when you finally liberate yourself from the old belief system they tried to implant. And then you begin to rebuild from the smallest things: a morning where you don't check your messages, a meal you cook without being criticized, an evening of peace that doesn't wait for anyone to return. You're no longer the one who holds the peace in an imbalanced relationship. You become the one who holds peace within yourself by keeping only what nourishes you. No one has the right to make you feel too sensitive for having real emotions. No one can manipulate you with love laced with punishment anymore. You've learned to distinguish connection from codependence disguised as love. And when you live with that clarity, something incredible happens. Your silence is no longer a passive wound. It becomes an unbreachable wall. Not built from anger, but from the strength of no longer needing to fight. True strength doesn't come from winning an argument, not from having the last word, not even from proving your worth through external success. True strength is when you no longer need validation from the one who once left you lost. When a narcissist sees you living well, not flaunting it, not putting on a show, not trying to make anyone jealous, they become unsettled, because their greatest fear is losing the role of being the center of your universe. They once believed they were the inspiration behind everything you did, whether it was love or hate. But now you don't need them as your motivation anymore. You begin investing time in yourself. You pick up the books you once left unfinished. You reconnect with healthy relationships that were long neglected. You rediscover passions that don't need anyone's approval, and you start filling the old void with the light that now radiates from within. Not to prove that you're okay, but because you are genuinely becoming okay. At that point, their watching, their testing, even their attempts to hoover you back, all become meaningless. Because you no longer react the way you used to. You no longer feel the need to explain, to justify, or to send messages like, "You hurt me." Your growth doesn't come from shouting that you've moved on, but from the deep silence that no longer wavers. And that, to the narcissist, is the fatal blow. They're not afraid of your anger. They're afraid of your peace. Because that peace proves what they've always tried to deny, that you've become strong enough not to need their presence, their understanding, or their apologies. And what about them? They may pretend not to care. They may act cold or happier than ever. But deep down, they know you've stepped out of the role they once assigned to you, the victim, the weak one, the one who always came back. Now you're no longer a character in their drama. You've rewritten the script. There's no tragic ending, no villain that needs exposing. There's only you, free, clear, and no longer needing anyone to complete you. In the end, what terrifies a narcissist isn't that you walked away. It's that you no longer look back. There's no conflicted gaze between love and hate. No desperate hope that they'll finally understand you. No more gathering the crumbs of affection they once tossed your way like pity. Everything has ended not with an explosion, but with a stillness so profound they can no longer feel your energy. And when they see you even from afar, even just a glimpse on social media or through someone else's words, they won't see someone broken, trying to hold it together. They'll see someone reborn, shaped by what was meant to destroy them. Someone they can no longer control, no longer read, no longer influence. You don't need to broadcast your growth. No need for poetic status updates or to recount the pain-filled journey. You only need to live fully, deliberately, and untethered. Your presence grounded in peace is the deepest form of resistance. A resistance without noise, but powerful enough to render every manipulation tactic they once used utterly powerless. So don't be surprised when they come back, not because they miss you, but because they miss being the center of your world. But this time, they won't find that old door waiting, only a wall built from experience, from tears, from quiet resilience, and from a new belief you deserve a love that doesn't require suffering. The truth is, you don't need to win their game. You only need to stop playing. No more reacting, no more chasing, no more letting your emotions be manipulated by someone who never deserved them in the first place. That is the truest form of freedom, not loud but unshakable. And no one can take it away from you. You may have once thought you were weak for walking away, but look again. You didn't give up, you chose to protect yourself. You didn't scream to be understood, you learned to listen to yourself. And now you no longer need to prove anything. The life you are living, the peace you are building piece by piece, is the most beautiful answer to every wound you've ever carried. To a narcissist, your lack of reaction isn't silence. It's the ultimate rejection of their power. When you no longer hurt because of them, no longer hope anything from them, no longer tell your story with them at the center, they lose control. They lose the mirror that once reflected their illusion. And they are left face to face with the one person they never truly understood themselves. Once they defined who you were. But today, you redefine yourself with resilience, with clarity, and with a healthy, grounded love for who you are. You're no longer the one waiting, no longer the one explaining, no longer the one suffering in silence. You are free, whole, and no longer need to look to the past to understand your worth in the present. And if you are on that journey, the journey back to yourself after someone else broke you, remember this: you are not alone. We're here to heal with you, to help you reignite the parts of you that you thought had gone dim. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and walk with us on this healing journey. Because you deserve a life where you're no longer controlled, where your tears no longer have to be hidden, and where you no longer have to trade pieces of yourself just to be loved. The truth is, you were never weak. You were simply learning how to rise in your own way. And that is a power no one can ever take away.